Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Grajdek. I'm Dr. Martha Grajdek. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. Feedback, particularly good feedback, drives growth unless the system encourages people to play defense. In this episode, we'll dive into the world of performance reviews and their potential benefits, or how they could demotivate instead. Performance reviews tend to be one of the least favorite activities both for the employee and for the manager or whoever the person is that has to engage in this performance review activity. This is all too often due to lack of training, lack of understanding, and not having systems in place. Some of the more common contributors to performance review failure could include things such as taking an extreme approach. For example, focusing either on all or mostly bad things, or on the other side of the spectrum, focusing mostly on positive things or all positive things and avoiding anything negative in the review. Whatever the intention, whatever the motivation for taking either approach on the extreme end, the end result is an ineffective performance review, where not only is feedback not providing the kind of growth potential that it could, but employees might be driven or encouraged to, at the very least, to be on the defensive side. Something else to think about is recency bias. Events, situations, performance, and any other thing that may affect feedback may be more meaningful and more likely to be brought up or treated more seriously if it happened in a more recent timeline, closer to the review. So, for example, if there was a positive incident or positive performance or situation that happened recently, and the reviewer chooses to focus on that and seemingly forget any other less positive or negative things that really should be addressed in the review as well, then the validity and the helpfulness of such a performance review is skewed. And the same is true if the opposite were the case, where a more recent negative situation was close to the time of the review, whereas other positive performances were forgotten because they were further back in time. How lenient or severe the reviews are matters a great deal. Some reviewers may tend to be more lenient or more severe. Sometimes that may change depending on who the employee is. This can end up with an unfair and an unjust review, one that will cause a person to get an inconsistent or a false message at the end of that performance review, rather than gaining proper and valuable feedback that could be used for growth and forward movement. Other times, the reviews may be too vague. There are not enough specific examples, making it difficult to learn and improve moving forward. Those are just a few things that could affect performance reviews and the validity or helpfulness of feedback. Good reviews will focus on facts, will focus on things that are anchored in behaviors that are related to business outcomes. They will also strive to separate potential from actual performance. While potential is valuable in terms of the kinds of feedback that encourages growth and promotes growth for an employee, potential cannot be the only thing that gets all the attention and focus. Actual performance, actual behaviors have to be measured, reviewed, and presented properly. Actual data, evidence logs, those are the kinds of things that will contribute to a good performance review, one that can be taken as a catalyst for growth and forward movement, one that will recognize efforts and performance where they need to be recognized. There's something to be said for diversity in performance reviews. The diversity can come in the form of multiple reviewers coming together to make an assessment before the actual performance review event takes place. Diversity of other factors should come into consideration as well. While it may be tempting and, frankly, may be easier to limit the number of points of focus when it comes to an actual performance review, a fair and well-executed performance review will focus on multiple things that pertain to the employee and how they are doing within the organization. In other words, you cannot limit the performance review to only a few behaviors. Some organizations may even find it beneficial to get anonymous feedback in terms of an employee's performance at the organization and then incorporate it. However, it's important to remember that anonymous feedback should be given only so much consideration and in no way replace factual data and result-driven outcomes. It's also important to remember the employee's agency when it comes to performance reviews. An employee should be given an opportunity to do a self-review prior to the formal feedback session. Such self-reviews should include outcomes as evidence of one's performance. They should also be connected to forward goals or future goals. Employees can perform self-reviews on an individual basis, but they can also seek feedback from their colleagues. When it comes to the actual review, this could be an event where it's a one-on-one meeting, or it could be something where a group of people address the performance review for an employee. However, it's very important that the employee doesn't feel like the organization is ganging up on him or her by pairing one individual employee with multiple reviewers. In an ideal situation, the employee would have a choice of whether the performance review consists only of the employee and one other person, or if a third or fourth individual would be included as a contributor to the exchange. When it comes to performance reviews, they are often left to the managers. Unfortunately, far too many managers lack the proper skills to conduct proper reviews. In some organizations, reviews are conducted by HR representatives. Regardless of who is executing the performance review, that individual absolutely must have the proper skills to conduct an effective performance review. This might require coaching some micro skills, not only social and people skills, but also how to effectively review the performance of another person. What is all too often forgotten by companies and organizations across the world is that placing someone in a management position doesn't automatically equip them with all the skills they need to do that job well. That's why it's so important for companies to give proper training to managers or HR employees, whoever conducts performance reviews, so that such reviews are done in the most effective and beneficial way. The reality of performance reviews is such that sometimes uncomfortable or negative things must be addressed and discussed. This is where managers really need the right skills. They absolutely must be equipped with conflict-safe scripts. Something else that is often missed when it comes to reviewing the performance of individual employees is the employee's opportunity to review the organization. Whether this is done at the same time as the employee's performance review or during a separate session, it is absolutely critical that an organization allow the employee to have a voice that is taken seriously, a voice that allows the employee to essentially give a performance review of their own employer. Whether such a feedback from the employee to the employer should happen at the same time as the employee's performance review or during a separate session is up for debate. It could come down to personal choice. All too often, performance reviews rely on borrowed or outdated guidelines. Sometimes employees are given a score or a ranking at the end of the performance review, almost like a grade in school. And while one may argue for the benefit of such an approach, an organization may want to focus instead on the employee's overall impact on the organization, its goals, and its mission. Rather than looking at a grade, why not take a portfolio view of the employee, their contributions, and their performance? Such an approach may be a lot more beneficial when we consider growth opportunities for both employee and the organization. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. All too often, performance reviews are dreaded or completely omitted. Sometimes they may focus on strictly the positive or strictly the negative. A review may turn out to be not at all helpful on one hand, or even detrimental. Sometimes the approach to the performance review may be outdated or irrelevant, focus on the wrong things, or be entirely too vague. A beneficial performance review will focus on data, facts, contributions, and business outcomes. The employee should take an active role in his or her review by starting a self-evaluation before the actual performance review takes place. Companies will do well to properly prepare their managers or HR employees, whoever is administering the reviews, so that they're done properly and effectively. And finally, rather than focusing on a vague ranking or a single grade for one's review, it may benefit the employee and the organization if the performance review remembers to focus on the employee's impact within the organization. As this week unfolds, I invite everybody, those in management and non-management positions, to consider performance reviews within their organization. Are they done on a regular basis, if at all? Are they beneficial? What kind of approach do they demonstrate? Do they leave the employee and the reviewer satisfied with the outcome, or does the event seem to be stressful or even useless despite the efforts? And while it's up to the employer to assess and perhaps revise the performance feedback within the organization, employees absolutely have the power and the responsibility to give feedback regarding their own performance reviews. Furthermore, I encourage every employee to be prepared with their own well-thought-out, well-organized assessment or performance review of the organization. This is a tremendous opportunity for growth and improvement for both employee and employer. For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I encourage you to check out my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G, where you can find the video version of the podcast. While you're there, check out some of the other videos. They focus on stress management. As I mentioned, Stress Free with Dr. G is on YouTube, and the link for that is in the description below. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.